Hi there, I'm Sarah Supiata Bennett coming to you from Dallas, Texas. Today is November the 6th, and I have Pete Marocco joining me this morning to discuss the aftermath of Propositions S, T, and U, but specifically S and U. My husband and I did financially support these initiatives, and I'm very grateful to have him here today. I am humbled and grateful for, again, all of the citizens that turned out in support of these two propositions. But I just want to ask something personal right now. I mean, I know you're exhausted, but tell me how you're feeling.
Wow. I think the word that you just used is the word that sums it up most for me is grateful.
Yeah.
I am grateful to the people of Dallas who got these propositions on the ballot. I'm grateful to the people that funded it, to the people that supported our effort from top to bottom, to the people that donated signs and copies and cards and airtime, everybody that contributed to the effort. This whole effort was about the people and for the people to get their day in court. They got their day on the ballot. The people spoke. And I am grateful. I'm actually grateful of the outcome exactly as it happened. I'm grateful that we didn't have just some uniform sort of monstrous win. I'm grateful that the win was sincere and it was reflective of people feeling differently about each of the propositions, including T. And I may say something that might shock you, but their selection on T was right.
Yeah.
It's right because it's what the people chose.
That's exactly right.
It's over. It's been adjudicated.
Yep.
The people chose it. It's right. That's it.
A lot of people that signed this petition, 170,000
Yeah.
people urged these movements to be actually something that passed, and they did. So why do you think they lent into such controversial, polarizing messaging?
I think probably when the people who wanted to defeat these measures, and let's be very clear, I don't place blame or point fingers at the Democrat Party at all, but that was the message that got put into this. This was a nonpartisan effort
That's
from
right.
the very beginning. It was always
It's a
nonpartisan.
total common sense effort,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Well, yeah, and honestly, and I took a sample of some of the signatures that we got a while back, and I don't want to quote exactly what it was, but if I recall, it was just shy of 60% were of the signatures that we collected were registered Democrats, and
That's
so
right.
it was shocking to me to see that flipped so on its
narrative,
head.
yeah.
But when you think about it, I think the way a lot of our modern politics is playing is people just take groups and they play identity politics with people identify this way or that way, and they just stack them up to get certain percentages. And they say, oh, well, this group represents 8% of the population, and therefore we are going to need that 8% in order to get to 51%. And so they just stack that up. It really doesn't have to do with the substance. It doesn't have to do with an analysis of what the policies will do for the people. It doesn't have to do with whether it's right or wrong, whether it could be better or throttled back. You don't have those discussions. It's just this identity of stacking people how you think is the best chance of winning. And to be quite candid with you, even though the original numbers, we polled all of these questions before any politics was involved.
Yep.
And the math was strongly in our favor. But that said, with politics involved, it totally changes the message. And it was really kind of became an interesting fight because at the same time, then my inbox was full of people that wanted to fight back then and start claiming grievances of 10 years ago, 15 years ago. This mayor did this. This mayor did that. This guy did something corrupt here. This is what's really going on. And I was telling everybody, hey, that's not what we're working on right now. All right, we're focused on the future.
That's right.
We're focused on a solution for the
right.
people of Dallas. You can have that fight, and maybe that's something that will come out of the discussion that just took place in Dallas, but that's not my fight. Our focus is on a future and a solution.
And that's terrific. I mean, and Dallas Hero was outspent about 8-1.
Yeah.
And so I know that it was not through monetary efforts on, on your end, on the donor side, right? And I mean, I know a lot of us prayed and fasted,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, we truly kind of turned it over collectively as a group of supporters
Yeah.
to God, to our higher power. And we were like, okay,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
We do our best, you know. I was really humbled to see a lot of the people that came out to help us and, you know, to wave signs and talk to people at the polls. You know, we didn't have any paid workers at
That's
the
right.
polls.
That's right.
I think, you know, my estimate is that they had close to 50. They had them mobilized of 50 paid workers.
That's
You know, out
expensive.
misrepresenting what the propositions were about. I had several discussions yesterday with several of these paid workers. Some of them were extremely adamant, and some of them actually listened and wanted to have constructive conversations. Some of them, when you discussed it with them, converted and said, "I think somebody's lied to me," you know, and they were really upset about. And I said, well, "Why don't we just read it together? Like, let's look at what it actually says." And they had been coached on talking points, and they had not read even the half page
Yep.
of Proposition S. It's not even a full page.
That's right.
And so the stories that were in there with very just bigoted messages, angry messages, I think it's sad that it took that narrative, but I just am so grateful that ultimately the people made a choice that is going to give power back to the people. And I can't think of anything more emblematic of a government of we the people, for the people, by the people, of the people. That's exactly what these propositions are. And it's our Constitution. It's our city's Constitution. It should be something that people understand in plain speak.
There's been people saying a lot. I'm not going to get into all of it.
Yeah.
But this sovereign immunity that the city of Dallas and the elected officials have once had, will this change moving forward? Can you talk to us a little bit about how this is going to be executed or how it should be executed, how they might stand against this if our lawsuit's going to have to be placed? I mean, how is this going to come to fruition?
So this is now the law.
It is the
This
law.
is the law
Yep.
of the land. And so the law of the land now says that Dallas has set a gold standard, a new standard for accountability. And I am certain that there will be people that, you know, want to litigate this one way or the other, and you'll have various different interpretations of people that will do that. And so I think it's an important discussion that will have to happen, but let's just go over the fundamentals of what the amendment actually says.
Yep.
And the amendment says that if the city is in violation or a city official is violating the law, then first they have to be given 60 days notice. First, you have to have an individual who has individualized harm. If you're not experiencing harm or your business is not experiencing harm any differently than the entire population, well, if it's an entire population offense, then that's something that's going to go to the Attorney General, right? But here you have to distinguish that you've experienced individualized harm. Then you have to give that 60 days notice to tell the city, get back in compliance with the law, and then you're not going to get sued to enforce the law. And I want to talk about those two words that probably sound really intimidating to people who don't know what they mean. Declaratory and injunctive relief do not mean monetary damages.
That's right.
One of the reasons we put the provision in there for attorney's fees was to make sure that this was something that was accessible to people who could not pay attorney's fees up front. So a reasoned attorney is going to have to make the decision whether or not they want to be responsible for a suit where they are unlikely to prevail and unlikely to get fees. Additionally, if somebody goes out there and were to just sort of pick fights and just try to tie up the city's hands, well, the prevailing party is entitled to fees. So if the city expends money and time defending a lawsuit that is not warranted or that is not successful, then the city can go to the court and say, okay, well, then we're entitled to our fees. So there is a risk on both sides of coming to fight with the city on something that if somebody were to bring something that did not have merit, then they would be facing a lawsuit, or they would be facing the costs of the lawsuit. So I think that the narrative, again, the narrative that was out there was just completely insane for what we were talking about, which was just, we're expecting you to abide by the law the same way we have to abide by the law. And the president of the National Black Police Association, who supported us, by the way.
I saw, yeah.
No, he gave us a fantastic endorsement. And he had pointed out, he said, look, police officers can be sued. He said, well, we face all sorts of jeopardy. He said, we've got, the police oversight board, and we've got all these people out there making trouble for police all the time. And he said, why aren't the most senior leaders at City Hall held to fear that citizen that might be over their shoulder, that might file a complaint, whatever that is? And he's right. He's right. Our government should fear that citizen over their shoulder that's overlooking them and saying, hey, we need to hold you accountable, and we're going to hold you accountable. And so I think just the mere awareness that accountability may be lurking behind you may make some politicians behave very differently.
Of course. I mean, we're the first city in the country to hold city leaders accountable. The first city in the country. This is monumental.
It is monumental. Yeah. It's a big moment. And the fact is, there are exceptions, and there is qualified waivers of immunity that are out there already.
That's right.
But this is a big moment for the people to say, we are waiving this. We are, we need to hold our city leaders accountable.
And interestingly enough, so I know early on in the night last night, even with the early votes, Proposition S was leading. And Proposition U, it was really neck and neck. But even with the passing of Proposition S, you all would have been able to hold elected leadership accountable for some of these numbers that I'm going to ask you to share on the police front. So can you talk to us about what is a law that's in place at the moment that has not been held at all for years as it relates to the staffing levels of the police?
So that's ordinance number 19983, and it was signed into law in 1988.
That's right.
It has been the law of the land for almost 40 years that we are required as a city to maintain a minimum staffing level of 3 officers to every 1,000 citizens. It has been achieved. It's been achieved when there was a deficit, and they paced up where they gained 400 new officers a year. They lost 150 officers, so the net gain was 250 officers per year. That's happened several years in Dallas's past. When you look back at how that would impact, how S could be used to achieve just that end, we were thinking for a second, well, what if we just win S? If we just won S, then we could go back and, again, with the qualified criteria that takes to get there, to have standing, then once you have that standing, you could say, okay, well, you're not abiding by the law. You're intentionally not abiding by the law. And a very important civil rights leader and a civic leader of many years, 5 decades, Betty Culbreth, pointed out to me how the budgetary process was working in effect inside the city manager's office, and why she was so upset with the way the city manager was abusing money that was, in fact, already allocated to the police. And what happens is, after a certain point in the year, if that staffing level has not been achieved, then the city manager can just say, "Oh shucks, we didn't get there, so let's spend the money on something else." But you can see where that goes, right? Is that this becomes an abusive cycle where people just say, "Shucks, we didn't make our quota this year.
That's right.
What else can we spend the money on?"
That's right.
And that's exactly what they've been doing. And I talked with her at length about this. In any case, I think that if you say, okay, well, there is an intentional pattern to not fund the police, or to make life in the police force so intolerable that people leave on their own and say, "Oh, but we gave you the funding, right? We did what we were supposed to do, but you just couldn't find the officers." Well, I think we can show that pattern. We can show that intent. We can show that there were deliberate backroom deals that were disingenuous. And so, now we would have had that. But now, look, Proposition U passed. And so I think one of the biggest things that I'm really happy about with that is, if only Proposition S had passed, we could have fought it out and gotten back to the 3,000, or from 3,000 officers back to 4,000 officers. But the important thing about this with Proposition U is the police are going to be treated better. The pension is going to be funded. There is a plan. There is a mandate in place now to get the pension funded and fix the problem that these politicians who opposed us, they're the ones who caused it. And we now have a solution that is going to start fixing it.
That's right. And these are my friends and families I care about. They came out against it.
Yeah.
And for me, I understand that they subscribe to this particular notion of it being bad for the city. I clearly disagreed with them, right? I mean, I'm not able to vote in the Dallas elections, but just by my heart, time, money, everything spent in helping these initiatives work, I learned so much about how all of the operations and finances would actually be impacted. So can you spend some time talking about how allowing residents to sue the city without governmental immunity impacts city operations and finances specifically?
You know, this was troubling for me. Obviously, we tried to take on any constructive criticism and then listen to people and ask, well, like flesh that out for me.
Yep.
So if in fact, say there is a new office within the office of the city attorney, something like that, if it was focused on this type of litigation, obviously that takes a certain amount of resources just to staff that. Or if it's a priority and they say, well, you just have to work with the resources you have and just prioritize. Does that sound familiar? Because that's what they've been telling the police all these years.
That's right.
Is just deal with the fact that you have less police officers and just prioritize better, right?
Yep.
And so maybe that's what the city attorney's office will have to do. I don't know how they're going to handle that. They still have a lot of agency and choices about how they're going to manage that. But what we know is that the people own the mandate now. The people own the mandate and the right for access to enforce the law and hold city leaders accountable.
That's right. And just to speak directly to some pain points that have been brought up in the past, what type of safeguards are in place to prevent frivolous lawsuits?
Well, first of all, I think the 60-day notice is one of the biggest one. I think making sure that there's no monetary damages. You're not going to get rich off of any of these suits.
That's right.
You know, and we made that very clear. So people can have confidence that this is a responsible, measured way of people enforcing the law on their politicians.
Yeah, that's right. And then speaking about accountability, I'm sure you read the Dallas Express article talking about the 5 council members traveling to Japan, $50,000, right? The city of Dallas is doing a $500,000 feasibility study. And for this rail, right, that is more than likely not going to have any legs. It doesn't have legs at this point, yet they're spending about $50,000.
They love feasibility studies, don't they?
To go to Japan. I'm like, of all the things that you could be wisely spending your funds on, at least wait till it's in a certain part of development, right? To be able to even think about paying that sort of money to send people to Japan. I am grateful that Proposition S passed.
Yes.
Right? With resounding support. Yeah. Now over to Proposition U.
All
I know it's been one of the more heated, right? I would say the most controversial of the three.
It's centered on that, I think.
Yeah. And so I understand where, my friends, Mayor Eric Johnson and Karen Mendelson have said, no. I mean, and then again, these are two people that I respect.
Sure.
I care for deeply. And I pray that we're going to be able to have really good dialogue moving forward about how these will be shaped within council, right? Within the city. So over to Prop U, can you just give us an overall picture of exactly what this sounds like and looks like?
So Proposition U, to sum it up, has 3 main components it's going to make public safety better in Dallas. It's going to make life as a Dallas police officer better. You're going to start seeing that change hopefully next year. First of all, you start with the pension. By funding the pension, we have to recognize, and again, I'm not focused backwards, but we had a massive pension crisis. We had a massive pension deficit, and that's a conversation Dallas may continue to have. That's not what we're focused on, but we have to fix that problem. We have to make sure that the people who sacrificed and served us are cared for and taken care of, and that promises made are promises kept. And that's what the pension is.
And can you tell our viewers and listeners exactly how much that is?
So the pension
Relating to the pension
in
specifically.
Proposition U would be funded, one half of the new revenue would go to fund the pension. The reason that this needs to be in the charter, the reason this needed to happen this way, is because we have a very long problem to solve, many billions of dollars of problems to solve over many years. So we needed something to make sure that the pension remains solvent over the duration of time. And so now after the pension, we move to just the competitive pay. Right now, a Dallas police officer is paid $12,000 less than Plano. And right now,
where it's more dangerous.
Oh, and right now, out of 11 major police departments in the area, we are number 11. And that's ridiculous, right? Mm-hmm. If you're at the core of a major metropolitan hub like this, and your police officers are paid that much less, your starting salary that much less, you can expect nothing other than for them to leave after a few months, years. In recent classes, they've had people leave after only a couple of weeks. So they went through a $275,000 investment of training, and then they immediately bounced and left and went off to another police department. And so that needs to change. And look, there are lots. This is very complex stuff when you're talking about multiple major police departments in a major urban area. I'm not going to pretend that that is easy or simple. But the important part about this is we didn't get into the minutia of the police business, right? We did not try to micromanage. We did not try to have something that was hyper prescriptive. That's all on them. And it's still discussions that they're going to need to have with the city. But what we've said is there's a floor. There's a safety net, and we're not going below this. And as a city of this size, our urban center police officers need to be in the top 5 in the area. And so that's going to happen. So now the police officers can expect a pay raise at current market pay, based on what's going on right now, of about $8,000 to $10,000. I don't know exactly where that's going to land. That's going to be a decision, again, that the police department makes with the city council. It's not going to touch their meet and confer contract. It's up to them to decide how that is going to be implemented.
That's right. And some of the opposition specifically stated, Proposition U completely oversimplifies our staffing issues. Right? They say our brave men and women in blue absolutely deserve to be paid competitively.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how the opposition has really hammered this home.
The whole point of this being in the charter is that it's just a floor. It is not a holistic plan for everything. It's not designed to hypermanage the police. We're not pretending that we are the overlords of the city council or something like that. We are just saying there's a floor. You can't go below this floor. As a city that loves our police, we value our police. We're not going to go through some of the political whims of the past. We're going to put them at the priority. That's it. And you're not going to go below this floor. And so now the details of that need to be worked out by the people who are the leaders that say, okay, well, now we know we have a floor, so we're not going below this. So as far as what the opposition was saying, I never really got any sense of how they were saying that it couldn't be afforded. I'll give you an example. Right now, the city pays more in overtime to police officers every single year than the cost of paying the salaries for the extra 900 officers every single year. The money's there.
Yep.
It's just poor management. It's poor decision making. And so there is a bigger discussion, a longer discussion. I think this is a great opportunity for the police department to have all those discussions they've been wanting to have and say, all right, we need to come up with a more specific long-term plan that keeps us above our constitutional floor. And it's great. It's empowering for police, and that's what we want.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the credentials of the attorney? Give us his name, his background, as it relates to writing this specific kind of law, because you were criticized heavily for the verbiage, right? Saying that they're totally oversimplified. Someone wrote them that had absolutely no idea as to how it should be implemented, yet this man is highly credentialized. And he's also been doing this for a long time. Can you tell us a little bit about him?
Well, and look, it was certainly one guy I think led the charge, but there were many people involved that were
That's
involved
right.
in government.
That's right.
Look, first of all, our honorary chair, Stephanie Carter, let's start with her.
Yeah.
She's been involved in local government. She's written legislation. She's been a part of that negotiation process, to totally come out with the false statement that these are people that don't understand government. That's just false. But most importantly, Art Martinez de Vara, who, he's an attorney. He's been experienced in this. He served in government as an executive in this legislative branch. He's worked with municipal governments. He's worked with the state governments. He has decades of experience writing law, writing statutes, writing legislation, writing petitions. This was not his first one. In our discussions with Art, he had, attorneys have these really tight niche specializations. Many do, not all, but I think some like Art have these really unique talent sets, and he does. He understands this stuff. And so for all of these challenges that we would get, he would say, well, I don't understand why they clearly just haven't read it.
And I'm going to actually read something again from Karen Merrick Johnson's October 4th.
Sure.
Right. In the Dallas Morning News, they're right up here. It says, however, their policy language is deeply flawed, and they would create more problems for the city than they would solve. For example, Proposition U would force City Council to budget for 900 additional officers, which you've actually addressed a lot of, regardless of whether those propositions are or can be filled. To be frank, it's not workable. We cannot vet, hire, train, and retain a quality police department in pursuit of a hiring quota. Can you talk to us about that hiring quota and the amount of time that can be taken to get the city of Dallas to where it needs to be?
Sure. So when we looked at this about what would be a realistic timeline, one of the things we looked at was other cities who have done this in the past, and what does Dallas history show us? First of all, even with Laura Miller, she had achieved some growth in the police department at one point at the end of her tenure, and Tom Leppert did as well. And you can see exactly how having adequate police staffing that's compliant with the law, again, let's go back to that, just having the minimum number of police officers that's compliant with the law changes the response time for a priority one call from, in most cases, over 10 or 11 minutes down to 6 minutes or less. So it's a dramatic change in exactly what we need, which is a response time, deterrence, presence of police officers. And so for them to break this down and say that it was not feasible, that it was not fiscally possible, again, I say, okay, tell me why. Tell me why. All right, I want to hear, break that down for me. They did not. And so the bottom line is with Mayor Johnson and Councilmember Mendelson, with their particular plan that they came up with, and I respect them both, but their plan, their strategy was flawed from the start because they knew some of the propositions were going to pass. So if some of the propositions, even, forget about S, T, and U for a second, some of the propositions were going to pass. We knew Proposition E was going to pass, term limits, right?
That's right.
And so the whole idea behind what they were trying to achieve was, if nothing passes, if we can just get everybody to vote no all the way down the ballot, then you'll give us another chance to repeat the failed 18 months that they just had in the last charter review process that they felt was a complete failure. So imagine telling the citizens, hey, after we just wasted 18 months on awful propositions that we don't believe in ourselves, you're going to give it right back to us to do again, because they can't amend the charter in less than every 2 years. Now the charter has been amended, right? So they cannot come back and amend the charter again in the next 2 years. But their plan was, well, if everybody votes no all the way down the ballot, well, then we could have just had a second chance with the same council that clearly did not produce results. I don't think there was any really a great thought in that strategy, because there was no way that we were going to get through this election without at least one of the 18 propositions passing.
And how is Dallas Hero going to be involved with helping to achieve these 4,000 police officers? What role is Dallas Hero going to play?
Wow. So I'm very anxious to see that myself. I'm very anxious to see that myself. We, the citizens, need to support our police. We need to work with the leaders of the Dallas Police Association and all of those police associations who should be present in those negotiations. And we need to bolster those good leaders, and we need to help them. We need to help them in their discussion, especially as we move forward into the elections in May. Now, we need to hold these people accountable. So I think that giving the police the assurance that there are citizens out there ready to support them in an effort that they lead, an effort that they're going to take the lead on, right? To say what they want. And look, the Dallas Police Association and the other associations that we collaborated with have put out lots of ideas. For instance, they've talked about the DART tax, how that might change. We're seeing other parts of Dallas saying, hey, the DART tax is going to have to change. People aren't using it as much. It's got a surplus. Why are we having these other areas of the budget that have such a problem, but you've got this one area where there's a surplus and nobody's using it? I shouldn't say nobody, but it's not being used at the pace that the money's coming in. And so there's been discussions of using a quarter of the DART tax, to help the police. That's another way that they could use it. Those are lots of discussions. There's lots of leadership opportunity there. That's what our elected leaders should be focused on, is those solutions. So as far as Dallas Heroes' role, it'll be interesting to see what we can carry forward and the role we can play. But I think, first of all, we need to guard our charter. We need to guard what the citizens just put in place. I think that's the most important thing.
How will that happen?
Well, we have to guard the mandate. Make no mistake about it. The people got this. There was a popular mandate. We got on the ballot, and the people made a choice. There is a firm mandate.
And don't you think some of these council members who are looking to seek re-election would not want to or try to thwart what their constituents voted in favor for?
The bottom line is this is a great referendum. What took place last night was a referendum. We can't understate that the people have said, hey, the corruption that we can see in plain day, it's over. Stop. We've got to have more accountability. People at city council that want to continue doing business as normal need to pay attention, and they need to rethink their next steps.
Yeah. And what I'd like to wrap with is another quote from that particular article. This is why in the coming months, we plan to start a process that will lead to the city's first comprehensive public safety policy to guide our next decade of decision-making. We want our next police chief to be an integral part of this process, which the Public Safety Committee will help guide. We also want all organizations interested in helping us develop a roadmap to build a safer city, including Dallas Hero, to be part of the process. How is Dallas Hero planning to engage with city officials in the community to ensure that these measures happen in a collaborative way, if possible, right?
We actually reached out to every single city council member exactly the same way. I got one invitation for a meeting. That was from the mayor. That's it. We reached out to all of them, even though many of them told people that they had not been consulted. No one had reached out to them. It's just not true. We reached out early. People were involved early as in the formation. We reached out to the people that were stakeholders, and we're going to continue that. And so,
was it via email?
Sure, email. We said we also hand delivered letters, the identical letter. I carried a stack of letters. Stephanie carried a stack of letters. So when people would say we didn't get it, well, the mayor got it. The mayor invited me for a meeting, but everybody got the same letter delivered exactly the same way. I've sent many emails to every single city council member exactly the same way. And so I think some of these people got so far out in ahead of their opposition that they didn't stop and say, listen, we all want a better Dallas. I'm not we didn't get in this to pick a fight with somebody. We didn't get in this to go back and fight with former mayors or anything like that. That's unproductive. I'm not interested in that. We just expect the city to take the citizens seriously. And it's no longer a question of whether they will. They have to now. It's the law.
That's right. And even at the recent event that the Dallas Express hosted, where former Mayor Tom Leppert was there, I think he handled himself fairly elegantly for how, I mean, people were very upset.
They were angry.
Yes. And the way I saw him handle himself was admirable. I was very pleased with that. And so I pray that that's more of what you all are able to see moving forward. The last thing I wanted to touch upon was how are you planning to be involved in the future?
Wow. Obviously last night was a big night, and I think that we could see a lot of paths for this. I want a Dallas that's the gold standard. We are the best in class city, and we need to remember it. We should honor our commitments to this city. We should take care of it. And I'll tell you, during my time at the State Department, the Defense Department, I've worked in many countries all over the world, in a lot of conflict states. And one of the things that I know is that there is nothing that is more impactful on that ballot, on your life, than what you're deciding at the local level. Like, you hear so much about the presidential race, the Senate race, the House, and it's these hot-headed arguments. But I will tell everybody on every side of the aisle, there is nothing you can do more for your day-to-day life than focus on stability, security, commerce, education, civic engagement, all at the local level. I want to say that again, the local level. This is where we should all be focused. So I'm going to continue to focus on making Dallas a better place and doing what I can. We, the people of Dallas, last night made history, and we got it through. I'm just so optimistic about people taking an active role in this. And I would love to see people who have never served in government coming back and requiring it to be a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And I think that a lot of wise decisions will be made if we start seeing better representative government to follow this on, and you won't see the waste in the spending that you do right now.
Well, I can't thank you enough for your insight today, Pete.
Oh, thank you.
I mean,
thank you for the opportunity.
Of course. I mean, you've served our country. You are an Oxford grad. You are a very bright, capable person.
Thank you.
And to have your energies focused on giving the people a voice is just something that I'm very grateful for. And
it was an honor.
Well, yeah. So thank you for being here today. And again, this is the first premiere interview with Pete Marocco, Executive Director of the Dallas Hero Initiative. And I am just very grateful for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.